Hello and welcome to BBC World News. Well, divisions have already begun to emerge between European Union leaders over how the bloc's hard-won agreement on curbing migration in Europe will be implemented. The deal, reached after marathon talks in Brussels, sees the creation of secure migrant centres within the EU in countries willing to build them. But France and Austria have already ruled out hosting the centres, arguing that they should only be in countries where migrants first arrive. External border controls will be strengthened and migrants will be prevented from moving within the EU. And the deal will also explore the possibility of what are being described as regional disembarkation platforms, basically camps outside the EU, such as in Africa, which would process refugees and migrants. But so far, no African countries appear willing to have them on their territory. While EU leaders debate migration in Brussels and the Mediterranean, a number of rescue ships are searching for migrants who've become stranded as they try to make that crossing to Europe. In one such incident, it's feared that around 100 migrants drowned when their overcrowded boat ran into trouble Friday off the coast of Libya. The missing include 2 babies and 3 children. Our reporter Gavin Lee has been on board one of the rescue ships in the Mediterranean, the Aquarius, and this is his latest report. Well, Matteo Villa is a research fellow for migration at the Italian Institute for International Political Studies. He joins me now from Milan. Matteo, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, this mammoth meeting in Brussels, did they actually achieve anything on the issue of migration?
Yeah, I mean, it was an 11-hour deal that actually achieved not much. We're actually back to square one. So what was a deal before, it's a deal right now. So it means that we did not really achieve a consensus on what is the most important thing for Europe, which is to find a compromise between those countries of first arrival, like Italy, Greece and Spain, who would like to relocate asylum seekers across the EU, and the others who wants to limit the actually secondary movements by asylum seekers, so those who cross other countries. So no, we didn't find an agreement there. There is just a piece of paper that brings us back a few days.
Why is this such an issue when the numbers have clearly been dropping from what they were at their height in around 2015?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there is some confusion, there is some tension that has built up over the years of high flows. But actually right now, at least in Italy, flows are down by 75%, and that's important. But actually perceptions, for example, in Italy is interestingly different. So, for example, as the flows have declined by 75%, 51% of Italians still think that they are higher or similar as last year. So clearly this is like a political crisis and a narrative crisis. And sure, there's also media, meaning that every time you see a boat arriving, I might know that the arrival's done, but the public does not know. So once a boat arrives with carrying 1,000 migrants, everybody believes that we are still in a crisis mode, and we go back to crisis mode, and political leaders try to find a solution to migration flows.
The populist government in Italy is perhaps in some quarters being blamed for this current crisis because it's refusing to let certain ships dock. But is Italy still struggling under the weight of the migrants that came a few years ago? Are they still having trouble processing them and looking at the asylum claims?
Well, if you look at pending asylum requests, it's still 150,000. That for Italy is the maximum ever. But actually, they have been going down for the last 3 months. So the crisis is receding, even in terms of stocks. And that's exactly what we should tell the public, I think. So over the last 3 months, the crisis has been receding. We've experienced 11 months of declining sea arrivals, and that's where we are at. So despite the lack of consensus within the EU, what we should actually care for is integration of migrants at home, and maybe, yes, returns of those who are irregularly here, or maybe some regularizations.
Well, Matteo Villa with the Institute for International Political Studies, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Well, as more protests and rallies are planned across the United States over the weekend against the president's immigration policy there, migrants who were separated from their children are still waiting to see them again. More than 2,000 children were taken away when their parents illegally crossed into the United States. That's before Donald Trump signed an executive order to stop the practice. Well, in this special report, our North America correspondent Alim Makbul has been given access to a centre in El Paso, Texas, housing recently released immigrant parents, only to find they still haven't been reunited with their children. From one artist to another, Ed Sheeran is being sued for $100 million for allegedly copying parts of Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. The singer is being accused of ripping off sections of the classic song for his #1 hit, Thinking Out Loud. Mr. Sheeran has already faced legal action over the same track in the past. He denies all allegations.